In the new episode of COVID Chronicles, we will tell you what President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev calls on Kazakhstan citizens to do. Support vaccination campaigns against coronavirus. How in a week the surgical department of the National Scientific Medical Center turned into an infectious one, and what difficulties did the medical staff face? I always compare any disease with a battle, like a war. How physical education will help overcome the post-COVID syndrome. The blood vessels have to work. They have to reach all parts of our body. The President of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, has claimed the high risk of a repeat of the situation with the coronavirus that occurred in the summer of 2020. At a meeting on the development of Almaty, the head of state noted the fact of an unstable epidemiological situation in the country. Several large cities of Kazakhstan are in the red zone, due to which restrictive measures have to be reintroduced. There is an increase in the number of complicated cases and the high occupancy rate of intensive care beds. There is a significant decrease in the epidemiological wariness of citizens, a loss of vigilance on their part and the part of entrepreneurs. There is a general indifference to the virus. Consequently, there is a high risk of a similar episode that occurred in the summer. Not everything, of course, depends on doctors and healthcare system, so once again I urge my fellow citizens not to lose patience, comply with all sanitary norms and support vaccination campaigns against coronavirus. Meanwhile, citizens of Kazakhstan will not be able to return to the country from abroad without a PCR test for COVID-19. Web magazine Vlast informs that the cost of the test will be included in the tour package. According to Kazakhstan's Association of Tour Operators, since the restart of flights, 33,000 people departed from the country, of which 227 returned without a PCR test.
Началось вообще так все. Наши сотрудники начали одним за другим болеть.
It all started when all our employees began to get sick one after another. We have a group chat, and the employees wrote, "Let's start doing this too. Our employees are sick and we cannot help them." Then the number of sick people increased, and the employees made a unanimous decision to change to the infectious hospital as well. Our chairman of the board supported this, and by a joint decision, it was decided to transform the hospital to the infectious one. It happened. They spent 1 week on engineering work. The hospital was re-equipped.
И это произошло, буквально там неделю, наверное, ушло на инженерные работы, то есть нужно было больницу несколько переоборудовать.
There was no treatment at that time. As such, they treated only pathogenic therapy. We understood the mechanism of pathogenesis and treated not the virus, but the consequences. Of course, everyone had a certain fear from the beginning. First, we did everything not to get infected. The second issue was how to treat, how to talk to our patients, what to say to them. All the time, our department has been treating other patients. For the entire period in the mode of an infectious hospital, only one employee got sick and suffered a mild form. This proves that there was a good organization, and the second, that we were provided with all the necessary personal protective equipment. The team proved itself well. They showed well-coordinated and friendly work. In general, medicine is not the work of one person. You can be a super talented and strong specialist, but if you have no team, then all the work is meaningless. A lot of videos are shot about doctors, medical stuff, but there is a great merit of engineers and electricians as well. It's hard to imagine how much oxygen was required in the hospital at that time. Usually, we used 200 kilograms of oxygen per day, but back then we needed 3 to 4 tons of oxygen per day. It had to be brought on time, and it was endless work. 24 ventilators were connected. Can you imagine what the load was on the electricity for all this to work without interruption? It was all provided by engineers and electricians. We needed decent ventilation because it was hot in the summer. Also, it was necessary to make ventilation so as not to infect the staff, and so it wasn't hot for patients.
Это тяжело сказать, вот там мы герои и все. Нет, это неправда. Плюс работники скорой, да, которые привозили.
We can't say we are the only heroes. That's not true. Ambulance workers brought patients during this period using or not using oxygen. The supply department brought in medicines and our remedies. About 200 PPEs, personal protective equipment, were spent on the hospital per day. It was a period of shortage, not counting masks, gloves. This is the material that went away one after another. We had difficulties with the patients because they also did not understand what kind of illness was it, and many of them had death anxiety. Many people worried. Some patients thought that we were treating them incorrectly, asked for antibiotics. Do you remember the moment when there were not any antibiotics in the city at all? But in fact, it was a virus, and you can't treat the virus with antibiotics. We had to convey this to patients. These were long conversations. It took a long time to calm a patient down. There is evidence-based medicine. We had to prove and explain that a virus is not a bacterium, but RNA containing an antibiotic will not work on it. It's useless. It's like filling a car with water. It's a liquid, you can fill it, or let's say, let it be alcohol. It is burning, but that does not mean the car will drive afterward. And here, it is the same. Someone uploaded treatment instructions on the internet, but who checked the effectiveness of these treatments? There is no evidence base. Some people say the phrase which always amazes me: it won't get any worse. This is not a cure. It shouldn't be worse, but it should be better. Ideally, a person should be discharged healthy and forget about everything. And if people continue using these treatments out of hand, we will see the consequences not now, but in 4-5 years. It was difficult to do the work in these suits. It's hot outside, you barely breathe, and when you take off your clothes, you're all wet. We changed suits 2-3 times a day because they were extremely wet. Everyone sweated and that was hard. It was also hard to breathe wearing a mask. It is like a respirator with valves. Glasses sweat too, you can't take them off. If you do, there is a risk of infection. First of all, yours. We had the marks from wearing masks. At first we took photos, but then no one paid attention to them. I still have a scar on my ear from wearing the mask. It tightens, and you don't feel the pain until you take it off.
Рубец от ношения маски. То есть она реально затягивает, и вы знаете, ты не чувствуешь боль там, ничего, пока ты ее не снимешь.
I always compare any disease with a battle, like a war. And in this war, there are 3, the patient, the doctor, and the disease. And 2 of them unite together and they defeat the 3rd. If the patient unites with the doctor, they will defeat the disease. But if the patient unites with the disease, the doctor will lose. Or vice versa, the doctor will be inactive and the disease in the aggregate will give the patient a problem. There is no such thing that everything depends on one person. It involves a number of factors. It was a war where everyone was involved. Again, I compare it with the war. And we need artillery, and we needed aviation and rear services. The work was collective, and I am grateful to everyone, from the nurse janitor to our leadership, because thanks to them we are alive, and we did not lose our face. We were able to help our people well enough. We have lost 2 of our employees. One employee, he has worked in this hospital since the start. He was a professor and the head of the department. It is very difficult, very sad. Probably this is a stage in our life that needs to be accepted, and this will be a lesson to all of us, not only to health workers, but even to state and government. This is a great lesson.
Если вообще мы говорим о реабилитации, здесь вопросы касаются и пульмонологической реабилитации.
If we are talking about rehabilitation, here the questions also relate to pulmonological rehabilitation because pneumofibrosis develops. This is a condition after suffering microstrokes, which also require rehabilitation with a neurologist. This is a rehabilitation by cardiologists of patients who have suffered a deterioration in coronary heart disease and have suffered myocarditis. This is a complex effect that includes therapists and physiotherapists. After suffering a coronavirus infection, our citizens should not forget that there is a risk of reinfection and, of course, other infections that surround the patient. You shouldn't forget to consider anti-epidemic measures. It's wrong to say, I have gone through the illness and that's why I do not wear a mask. What factors can negatively influence? These are harmful factors that act on the body in terms of toxic effects. These are not very high-quality food products containing various substances that can be toxic. For example, alcohol and smoking are toxic to the immune system, liver function, and generally affect homeostasis. That's bad. The blood vessels have to work. They have to reach all parts of our body. This is a common physical activity, but it also varies. For example, if this is a patient who has suffered a stroke, he was brought home, he just needs basic movements, or if it is a young man, he can run 10 kilometers. Everything is personal. But we should understand that it's important to increase some possible level. You don't have to do heavy physical activities. Everything should be within limits, but this should take place. Your body needs movements. You should spend more time in open spaces, not the closed ones. In closed rooms, there is always a risk of reinfection with the so-called superinfection, an infection that is not still. This is all a state of immune rehabilitation. As for drugs, it's hard for me to raise the topic because there are a lot of drugs that affect the immune system and improve its function. Each case is personal.
Вот. И сейчас сказать для, скажем, каждый пациент, он индивидуальный со своей проблемой. Стресс однозначно влияет на состояние.
Stress certainly affects the state of the immune system. There is such a concept, stress induced by immunodeficiency. There is such science of neuroimmunology, and it has been proven that various neurotransmitters can affect the immune system. When the immune system is recovered, there should not be any block on the part of the nervous system. Therefore, the normal state means no stress. Unfortunately, our patients are afraid, but it is very important to trust doctors. We have excellent protocols. Any doctor can see them. Doctors are now on the forward line, and it is very important to understand the doctor and respect the nursing staff to make things easier. This is a multi-component effect that affects the recovering of the immune system, its normal function.
Понимать врача и относиться все-таки с уважением к врачебному медицинскому персоналу, чтобы нам было тоже немножко легче.